Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we'll be considering the following topic: unicellular versus multicellular organisms. Let's begin. So what do we mean by unicellular organisms? What are unicellular organisms? Well, unicellular organisms are organisms that are made up of a single cell that carries out all life processes. Now, when we talk about all life processes, we're talking about things like feeding and respiration and movement and growth, excretion and reproduction. But what are some examples of unicellular organisms? Well, we have bacteria, amoeba, paramecium, and yeast. These are all examples of unicellular organisms. But what are some key features of unicellular organisms? Well, unicellular organisms are made up of one cell, so they are made up of a single cell only. The cell performs all functions of life. Unicellular organisms are usually microscopic, and they can live independently. That means that they can live on their own. Now let's talk about multicellular organisms. What are multicellular organisms? Well, multicellular organisms are organisms that are made up of many cells. Remember, unicellular organisms, they consist of one cell, but multicellular organisms are made up of many cells that are specialized and work together to carry out life processes. So what are some examples of multicellular organisms? Well, humans, fishes, birds, plants, and certain fungi are all examples of multicellular organisms. Now let's consider key features of multicellular organisms. Well, they are made up of many cells. In multicellular organisms, we have cells that are specialized. Multicellular organisms consist of cells, and cells form tissues, and tissues form organs, and organs form organ systems. And then, in multicellular organisms, we have cells that depend on each other to survive, whereas in unicellular organisms, that cell can live independently. But in multicellular organisms, these cells depend on each other to survive. Now, let's talk about protozoa and metazoa. What do we mean by that? Well, within the big, broad group of unicellular organisms, there are subgroups or subsets. One specific subgroup is protozoa. So protozoa are a specific type of unicellular organisms that are animal-like. This group refers only to unicellular organisms that have animal-like behavior. For example, the amoeba. The amoeba falls within this category. Next, we have metazoa. So, within the big, broad group of multicellular organisms, there are subgroups or subsets. One specific subgroup is metazoa. Only animals fall into this category. So if you're an animal, then you belong to metazoa. So cats and dogs and tigers all are part of this category. They all belong to metazoa. So metazoa are multicellular animals with specialized cells and tissues. So we have protozoa and metazoa. Protozoa is a subgroup of unicellular organisms, and metazoa is a subgroup of multicellular organisms. Now let's look at this table. This table is very good because it summarizes unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. So unicellular organisms consist of one cell, whereas multicellular organisms consist of many cells. In terms of the level of organization for unicellular organisms, they only have the cellular level. Only, but multicellular organisms, well, they have cells that group together to form tissues, and then tissues that group together to form organs, and then organs that group together to form organ systems. Now, in terms of the division of labor for unicellular organisms, the division of labor is absent. One cell performs all life processes, and for the division of labor for multicellular organisms, it is definitely present because different cells perform different functions. Next, we have specialization. So for unicellular organisms, there's no specialized cells, but for multicellular organisms, there are definitely specialized cells with specific functions. Next, we have size. Unicellular organisms are definitely smaller than multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms are microscopic, whereas multicellular organisms are macroscopic. Then we have reproduction. Unicellular organisms, in terms of their reproduction, they mostly undergo asexual reproduction. So for unicellular organisms, we have asexual reproduction that is mostly done, but they also can do sexual reproduction as well. But for multicellular organisms, we have sexual reproduction that is most common, but they could also do asexual reproduction as well. Then we have body systems. For unicellular organisms, there are no body systems. So the body systems are absent, but for multicellular organisms, there are definitely body systems that are present. Indeed, for unicellular organisms, in terms of their locomotion, in terms of how they move, well, unicellular organisms can move using cilia, flagella, or pseudopodia. But for multicellular organisms, they move using muscles and skeletons. Then we have complexity. Which one do you think is more complex? Multicellular or unicellular organisms? Indeed, multicellular organisms are definitely more complex. So they have a more complex structure. But unicellular organisms have a simple structure. And finally, we have examples. So what are some examples of unicellular organisms? We have amoeba, we have paramecium. And for multicellular organisms, we have humans, fish, and insects. Okay, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you got something from this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone. See you soon.